Imagine waking up desperately thirsty in 14th century Europe. The river is only a few steps away, but everyone knows a terrifying truth: drinking from it could leave you bleeding from the inside out. So instead, you drink beer, you give it to your children, your local monastery brews thousands of liters of it, and the church calls it a gift from God. The last people you'd expect to spend centuries perfecting alcohol were medieval monks. Yet generation after generation, they refined recipes, improved brewing techniques, and turned monasteries into some of the most successful breweries on earth. Why were some of Europe's holiest men obsessed with making better beer? Was it a loophole in strict religious rules, a way to make life in the Middle Ages more bearable, or was beer part of something far more important? And why did the church later turn this gift from God into something associated with sin? To answer that, we need to go back to Lent. For 40 days, monks were forbidden from eating solid food: no bread, no meat, nothing. But a fasting monk still had to chop wood, he still had to work the farms, he still had to pray 7 times a day. How do you survive for 40 days with no food? The monks found a clever loophole. The church rule said, liquids do not break the fast. So the monks started brewing beer, but this wasn't regular beer. They made it incredibly thick, dark, and packed with heavy grain. It was so full of calories that they actually called it liquid bread. It kept them alive, it gave them energy, and because the water in the local rivers was filled with deadly bacteria, this beer was the safest thing they could consume. How much did they drink? A single monk would drink up to 5 liters of this beer every single day. They didn't drink it to party, they drank it to survive. For hundreds of years, the church treated making beer as a holy duty. The monks made thousands of liters of it, but they didn't sell it. They kept it behind their holy walls. So if you were a regular person, who did you buy your beer from? Women on the street. For hundreds of years, women controlled the entire beer business. They owned the shops, they made the money. Then in 1348, everything changed. The Black Death swept through Europe. Millions of people died from sickness and dirty water, but people noticed a strange rule: those who drank beer lived longer. People started buying more beer, a lot more. Suddenly, making beer wasn't just a good business, it was a gold mine. And the church realized there was a massive amount of profit to be made. Greed took over, they wanted the money for themselves. But there was a huge problem. They couldn't just take over, the women already owned the shops, they knew the recipes, they had all the loyal customers. How do you steal a gold mine from the people who built it? You have to destroy them. And the men in power were about to use a brand new weapon to do it. What was the weapon? Not swords, not new laws. It was a story. To steal the beer empire, the men in power had to make people terrified of the women running it. Think about how these women worked every day. To be seen in a crowded, muddy market, they wore tall, pointed hats. They boiled water in giant, bubbling cauldrons. To keep mice away from their grain, they kept pet cats. And to tell people the beer was ready, they placed a broomstick outside their door. Pointed hat, cauldron, cat, broomstick. Does that sound familiar? The scary monster you see on Halloween was just a medieval woman trying to make a living. The church and greedy men started spreading terrifying rumors. They told the public these women were not making beer, they were doing dark magic. They said the beer would make you sin. They called the women's shops the devil's chapel. They took a smart businesswoman and turned her into a witch. It was completely unfair, it was a total lie, but it worked perfectly. People got scared, they stopped buying from the women were chased out of the business they built. Just like that, the men took over the gold mine. But the church didn't want to just sell beer, they wanted to tax every single drop of it in Europe. But how do you tax a drink that anyone can make at home? You force them to buy a secret ingredient. The secret ingredient was a mix of bitter herbs called brewed. The church made a strict rule: if you wanted to make beer, you couldn't just use anything, you had to use their herbs, and you had to pay them a heavy tax to get it. It didn't matter if you made it at home, it didn't matter if you were poor, if you made beer, the church got paid. It was the perfect trap. Every sip of beer in Europe made the church richer. Until a simple green weed ruined their entire empire. The weed was called hops, it grew wild on fences, anyone could pick it, it was completely free, and even better, it kept the beer fresh much longer than the church's expensive herbs. People quickly realized they could make better beer without paying the church a single penny. Because hops grew wild everywhere, the church couldn't control them, they couldn't tax them. A famous religious rebel named Martin Luther saw this. He told everyone to drink hopped beer. Why? Because every time you drank it, you were taking money away from the greedy men in power. Then, in 1516, a massive new law was passed. It was called the Beer Purity Law. It said real beer could only be made with hops. Just like that, the church's giant money machine broke. Overnight, they lost their monopoly. They lost the gold mine. And that is when the story changed for the final time. The liquid in the cup never changed. It was always just water, grain, and yeast. When it made the church rich, they called it a holy miracle. When it made regular people rich, they called it a deadly sin. The beer never changed. What changed was who controlled it. When beer supported monasteries, it was called a gift from God. When it enriched ordinary people outside that system, it became a problem. And that's the strangest part of this story. For centuries, people were told that beer was dangerous because of what was inside the cup. But the real battle was never over the drink itself. It was over who got to profit from